Again. Does everyone say that y'all are recording?
It says live. Yes. Yes,
All
it's
right,
recording.
cool. I trust technology even though I probably shouldn't, so give me just a second. Uh, no, cancel. We'll run with it. All right. And three, two, one. Hello, hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host Keegan. And this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. And today's guests are storytellers, community leaders, and passionate voices in the world of recovery and transformation. Joy Jones is a powerhouse poet, playwright, author, and educator whose words have sparked conversations across classrooms, stages, and even the pages of the Washington Post. She brings depth, rhythm, and radical clarity to the stories we need to hear. Tom Adams, MSW, is a writer and speaker rooted in the intersection of personal growth, spirituality, and recovery. With a background in nonprofit leadership and decades of engagement in the 12-step movement, Tom brings a rare combination of insight, grounding, and compassion. Together, they've co-authored a powerful new biography titled A Marriage That Changed the World, Lois and Bill Wilson, and the Addiction Recovery Movement. A behind-the-scenes looks at the relationship the, a look behind the scenes relationship that helped birth Alcoholics Anonymous and, in many ways, changed the landscape of recovery forever. So, Tom and Joy, how are y'all doing today?
Excited to meet you, Keegan, and to talk to your audience about Lois and Bill Wilson, because, as you said, they transformed the landscape for recovery from substance abuse in the United States and around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm delighted to be here with you, Keegan, and thank you for your service. And you're doing the same thing we're doing, carrying a message of hope to people that often don't have hope. So we're delighted to be here with you.
Oh, well, I really appreciate it. And it's special because this is a story that we don't actually hear that often. You know, it's everyone hears about Bill and Dr. Bob, but what about their wives? You know, like are they just like tossed off to the side? And that's not fair. So y'all actually wrote a book about that, and it feels like justice has finally been made. So, why don't y'all tell me a little bit about the book, how y'all came to write it, and just what is it about?
Well, this is Tom's brainchild. Both of us are writers, and one day he told me he was thinking about writing a biography about Bill Wilson and
Mm-hmm.
Lois Wilson, his wife, because he thought the marriage was spiritual and important to getting AA and then Al-Anon and then all the multiple 12-step programs that have evolved from that.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, oh, you ought to do that. That's a fabulous idea for a book. I had no intentions of writing the book. I was just going to read it once Tom wrote it. But somehow the plan changed. But Tom, how did you initially think to include Lois?
Well, I sort of came by this in the 90s. I was going through a rough patch in my own life. I'd gone through a divorce, and I was reading a lot of books for teens that found them emotionally comforting when I was going through that process. And I was looking around and I saw nothing about Lois or Bill Wilson. And then I looked at the adults and I said, well, this is crazy. These people have changed my life. Why is there nothing for young people? How are they going to learn about this if it's not in the libraries?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started researching and working on it. And then life intervened. I got remarried and I started a business. And so I sort of set it aside for a while. And then when I retired, I intended to write and I wasn't sure what to write about. And Joy and I were in a writers group together. And she had a market study of one. She talked to a friend of hers who told her this was a great idea. And based on that extensive market study, we launched off on this.
No, I have to tell you how that happened. I was in a 12-step meeting and I was making a point about something else.
Mm-hmm.
And as an aside, I mentioned that I had read about this book that was about the marriage of Bill and Lois Wilson and how that was so important to the whole substance abuse movement. And I hadn't really read a book. Tom had showed me some of the pages of his early start on the topic. And before the meeting was even over, a woman in the meeting passed me a note saying, I want to read that book.
Oh.
And that let me know that we were onto something, or that Tom was onto something really uh, special, for her to not even wait till the meeting was over to approach me. But she wrote me a note and passed it to me while I'm still talking, saying, give me the name of that book. I want to read it. So,
Oh,
And
wow.
working on this book, it was a little bit like a mystery, except we weren't writing the mystery. The mystery was unfolding before us. You know,
Ooh.
I was curious about Lois and Bill and their relationships. And there's this one picture that I used to hold in my mind of the two of them on the porch, standing outside, and they looked angry or frustrated with one another. And I thought, wow, I wonder if that was what the marriage was like all the time, if they were angry and frustrated all the time.
Yeah.
And as I dove into it and read letters that they both wrote to each other, these passionate love letters, and as I looked at how they traveled together throughout their life, they were married for 50 some years. Uh,
Whoa.
you don't tolerate people for 50 some years, typically.
Uh-uh.
You know, and the it just it just felt like Lois was so misunderstood and misrepresented. Joy and I share a friend who was a passionate member of Al-Anon, and it saved her life. But she had a hard time with Lois. She just couldn't understand why Lois stayed in the marriage. And
Mm.
by doing research, we found out that there were reasons, good reasons, despite
Okay.
the culture, that Lois stayed in the marriage. And that's really what allowed Bill to live and survive. And the same is true with Dr. Bob. Without Ann Smith, and without all the wives of these early alcoholics, they'd be dead. We wouldn't be having this conversation. And so, when people ask me, what's the book about? I said, well, read the title. It's a marriage that changed the world.
That
now
is.
Tom has a little rosier view about Lois and Bill Wilson's marriage than I do. Certainly,
Oh.
it was a profound pairing. And I think some of the reasons Lois stayed were love, and some of them were less healthy reasons. I think she was codependent. Uh, there's a quote in the book that we got from her biography,
Mm.
When Love Is Not Enough," where she says, "My life started the day I met Bill, when he got sober and I got well." So, she made Bill the centerpiece of her whole existence, both
Mm-hmm.
when he was drinking and when he was sober. He was just the sun and moon and the stars to her. So we have that. And then for a woman of her generation, there weren't a lot of options if you left your husband. Divorce was considered shameful.
Mm-hmm.
Women didn't have access to well-paying jobs to support themselves.
Uh-huh.
Um, Lois probably reasoned, if Bill would just get his act together and go back to working as an analyst on Wall Street, I would probably have a better standard of living than what I currently have as the breadwinner working at Macy's. So those things probably made her stick around. And then, of course, she really, truly, genuinely loved him.
Mm. Yeah, that is crazy that they were married for so long, and he is one of the founders of AA. And it really does kind of, there's that chapter in AA, chapter to wives, and that one just is like, it just touches on it. And even then, I think that they had to revamp it for the new edition of AA, didn't they? But I have to say that myself personally, in the marriage I'm in, if it wasn't for my supportive wife, I don't know where I would be. So, Tom, I think you really nailed it that they wouldn't be around. And Joy, I think that you really nailed it that there was a mix of things going on, not just support altogether, right?
Yes. And the wives were not just the little lady behind the great man. They were helpful in practical ways for some of the things that are part of the 12-step tradition even now.
Really?
Uh, yes, Anne in particular, it was her spiritual practices that influenced Dr. Bob. She literally trained Dr. Bob, Bill, and Lois on how to have a devotional period every morning, to sit and have a quiet time to cultivate that conscious contact with God, so that they would have their marching orders for the day. Uh, Tom, maybe you can help me out. There was something she used to say to people that I think we still say in meetings. It's escaping me at the moment. But at any rate, um,
Yeah, she so Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob were both from Vermont,
Mm-hmm.
and they both grew up in families where religion was shoved down their throat, and they both resolved that they hoped to have nothing to do with religion for the rest of their lives. And so they came to this spirituality very reluctantly. They were out of options, you know.
Mm-hmm.
When you're out of options, then maybe there is a God. Uh, the the and so Anne Smith had been grown up in a family of faith. Her parents were railroad people. She got a scholarship to Wellesley University,
Mm-hmm.
a really well-established university. Lois Wilson also went to college. I mean, so for women who were born in the 1800s, uh, who were both educated and who were able to really influence their husbands. I mean, as I say, Bill and Bob didn't really. I mean, they were coming to this reluctantly, but when Bill had his spiritual awakening, he became open. When he had his white light experience in Towns Hospital, and Dr. Bob knew he was out of aces. His card playing days were over, and so they both were teachable. And Anne Smith would quote from the Bible, from the Epistle of St. James, and she would say over and over again, "Faith without works is dead." And that's really what they embraced.
Mm-hmm.
That they needed faith and they needed service. And that became Dr. Bob's mantra, love and service. And that became the life that Bill and Lois and Bob and Ann and all the people that came after them followed. That's what the 12th step is about. We have a spiritual awakening so that we can pass it on. And if we don't pass it on, we forget what we have and we go back to thinking we're in charge, and then we're drunk again.
Yeah, you sure got that last part right, and I'm so glad I haven't had to experience it, and I don't ever plan on it. But that's the thing, is that steps 10, 11, and 12 are like the maintenance steps. They are the continuing on. So it's really interesting that Ann Smith was the one to help set the pace for 10, 11, and 12.
Yeah.
Huh, I had no idea.
I want to go back to Lois just for a minute and
Okay.
what helped her to stay.
Yeah.
So she grew up. Her parents had an unusually close relationship for the time. They were emotionally, what would you call it?
affectionate, be affectionate.
Affectionate with one another.
Oh,
And so
okay.
she grew up where she knew there was love in the room, and she experienced that. And then her grandfather was a minister in this part of the Christian church called Swedenborgian. And she read and embraced the Swedenborgian. And if you read their literature, which we have in the book, you see that they had a deep commitment to marriage and to community service. And there's also, she had this sense that it's a little bit like the alcoholic thinks he's invincible. Well, the wife of an alcoholic thinks they're going to change the person. There's no alcoholic too great for a spouse to not be able to fix. And Lois was clearly from that school, and she believed she could straighten Bill out.
Oh. So what you just said right there does kind of like really resonate with the whole codependency aspect, because she really wanted to fix him, and whenever I have to think about my steps, how people present themselves, how they act, and all that stuff is outside of my power, so I have to let it go. But
Right.
she didn't let it go.
Yeah. Well, she did. The one of the things that's interesting about Lois, we make a big deal as we should, in the AA Big Book about Bill's spiritual awakening.
Mm-hmm.
That white light experience in Towns Hospital that allowed him to have the faith to write the steps and the traditions when he was going through deep depression. I mean, the things that Bill accomplished, suffering from a major mental health disorder, of depression, was incredible. But if you look at Lois, her spiritual awakening occurred in a very simple moment when Bill said to her, "Lois, hurry up, we got to get to the Oxford meeting." And she picked up a shoe and threw it at him, and then said to him, "Damn your old meetings." And nobody talks about that in AA too much. Uh, but that's the beginning of Lois's spiritual awakening. And I'd like to read to you what she said after she had that.
Yeah.
She couldn't understand why she was so angry. Bill was sober. Why am I upset so much? And she says, "My outburst caused me to reflect. I might have had an excuse for losing my temper during his drinking years, but why now, when everything was fine, had I reacted so violently to his very natural remark? A friend at the Oxford meeting helped me to realize that although I had been in the group for nearly 2 years trying to help others, I had never put my reliance wholly on God, but had been trying to do it all by myself. That day, I began looking at myself analytically for the first time."
Ooh.
And later on, she says that she began to do an inventory every day.
Mm.
And so you think about before Al Anon was started in 1951, there were 87 groups that organically grew up around the country of spouses of alcoholics. They had all kinds of different names. And Bill was traveling around the country and he saw all these groups and he comes back and he says, "Lois, we got to do something with these 87 groups. They're not alcoholics. We can't call them AA groups. You need to do something about this."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Lois says, "No, I don't, Bill." She says, "I'm enjoying gardening. We've been homeless for 2 years. Now I have a house and I have a garden. And you want me to, no, thanks." And so she took a little while to think about it. And eventually she came around and said, "Well, maybe I will." But these 87 groups, eventually, they could have been sitting around complaining about you and me, about the alcoholics in their life.
Oh yeah.
There's plenty to talk about.
Yeah.
There's plenty of anger, plenty of resentment, plenty of financial insecurity, and their hurt children and their generations that it goes on. It's a painful thing.
Yeah.
But Lois's spiritual awakening allowed these women to embrace the 12 steps and to have meetings where they talked about themselves and about how do I apply the steps to my life. And that radically changed the face of recovery in America.
Wow. That is
I have to
crazy.
tell you, it blew my mind when I realized that Al-Anon was Bill's idea. I'm like,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that just surprised me. And what surprised me even further was Lois said, "No, I don't want to start Al-Anon." But because Bill asked her, she eventually was persuaded and she changed her mind. That sounds so Al-Anonic to me. I'm glad she did. But it's not the way I would have expected the story to go.
Yeah. No.
Keegan, I always have to reinterpret for Joy and help her out a little there.
I
First
mean,
of all, Bill had a practical reason. He had these 87 groups, and they were all writing to his office and saying, "We want to be on your AA list."
oh
And
wow.
he couldn't put them on the AA list because they didn't meet the primary purpose. They didn't have a problem with alcohol.
Yeah.
And so he needed a place to put them. So he had a practical reason to ask Lois.
Huh.
And Lois didn't just do this because Bill asked her. She knew from her firsthand experience the pain of those early years of being sober with Bill. And she knew what it was like for these families to be in transition. And she wanted to help them. And we can't diminish that.
Yeah, for sure. And that does bring up something because whenever she threw her shoe at him and said, "Damn the meetings," it does highlight something that sometimes people will replace alcohol with the meetings or a substance with the meetings sometimes. And that I was wondering, like, how did she handle that? Because he was the founder. So almost all the time, like him and Dr. Bob, they had to sit there and just focus all their time and energy towards this kind of thing, didn't they?
That's
So,
part of why she was so angry. That in the beginning, she she expected she was getting her bill back, and what she got was a sober Bill doing something else.
Yeah, he never had a career after that.
Huh. He
So
never did?
no, he had some brief periods where he worked, but he never really went back to being a normal working man.
Oh.
And there was a 2 year period where they moved 54 times because he didn't have steady employment and they didn't have a home. They got the childhood home she grew up in, they were living in at one point. It was foreclosed upon and they had to get out. And so they went from friend to campsite to stranger's house to living in the AA meeting room. You know, it's,
Whoa. I
yeah,
had no idea. Like, and that's part of the thing is that you hear all the heroic parts. We hear the accomplishments. We don't hear the actual struggle that went into this. And I think that that's where a lot of people in early recovery fall short. They think that it shouldn't be this difficult early on, right? Because if it was, no one would have got through it. So uh, it's really astounding that Lewis was able to do so much and yet still be behind the curtains the whole time. Do you think that she did that on purpose, or do you think that it just kind of happened that way?
Well, she was behind the curtain uh, in AA. So she, and she says this, and it's documented a number of places, that her first love was AA because that gave her bill back.
Mm.
But beginning in 1951, she was very intimately involved in every step of the growth of Al-Anon. I
Mm.
mean, if you were a 12-step nerd, you might be interested in the 12 concepts.
Oh, I
And
heard of the 12 concepts.
yeah, so we got steps, traditions, and concepts.
Uh-huh.
Bill was a little anal and wanted to make sure that people understood exactly what he meant. And so he wrote these very elaborate 12 concepts about how the organization should work. And they're, Bill's an engineer, and they're kind of in this very. Lois took those things and put them into English
Oh.
and made them very understandable. And if you read the Al Anon 12 concepts, you know what they mean and you
Hmm.
understand them and you can practice them. Lois would, I mean, if you think about the idea of a family disease, where did that come from?
Mm.
Well, Lois and these 87 groups, they found a writing from Kentucky that they used initially to help them understand the family disease. And
Huh.
the idea of detaching with love, where did that come from? And so Lois and all these early Al Anon members developed this program together. And just as Bill was the architect of AA,
Mm-hmm.
Lois was the architect of Al Anon, except she's not given credit for it because she had a different leadership style. She
Hmm.
would, you know, when they were getting ready to start Al Anon, she and another woman, Ann Bingham,
Mm-hmm.
sent letters to the 87 groups and said, say, we're thinking about setting up a clearinghouse. Do you think that'd be a good idea? And we're debating what to call this thing. What ideas do you have? And she had this very engaging and democratic way of building consensus about things. And she and the so if you've been to any Al-Anon meetings, the leadership culture is much different than it is in AA.
Yeah.
And so that didn't happen by accident. I mean, Lois is the architect of that,
Huh.
and is not given credit. And so when people think about Lois and sort of, as you say, brush her off, uh, first of all, she kept Bill alive. Second of all, she supported him in getting AA started. And third of all, she got Al-Anon going, which is the first replication of the 12-step groups. And if you think about the later replications, the Gambling Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, all those are later replications.
Mm.
Lois did the first replication.
Oh.
and
Huh.
Lois was active in Alcoholics Anonymous first with the Oxford group. It wouldn't just be one person. You know, couples would go, married couples would go to the meetings,
Mm-hmm.
and then as the Oxford group morphed into AA, in the beginning, couples would attend that. Only a little bit later did it was it restricted just to the alcoholic for the meeting. And even after Bill died, Lois was often invited to speak at AA conventions and meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Oh wow. That must have been,
she did double duty.
yeah, double duty for sure. And that is no small task for anyone. And I can only imagine the pressure that she felt. Does she go into like her journal or diary about the inner struggles that she was feeling the whole time?
So she does somewhat, particularly in the drinking years.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple places where you could see her hitting bottom.
Mm.
What's going to become of us? I see, I and there's several very descriptive scenes, but by and large, she keeps her feelings to herself. Uh, you know, you may have heard there's some accusations that Bill was somewhat of a womanizer,
Mm-hmm.
and so you can look everywhere in the world you want to look, and you'll never find Lois saying a word about that. Uh,
Huh.
she was silent on that topic. Uh,
Mm.
and if you look at the love letters they sent to each other at each anniversary, if you look at the time they spent, they traveled every winter, they went someplace warm.
Mm-hmm.
Every summer, they went to the South. This is in addition to all their travel to Europe and their travel to around the world.
Uh-huh.
Uh, so again, these are two people hanging out together and spending a lot of time together. Lois admitted that she didn't really know how to help Bill with his depression.
Mm.
I think that was baffling to her. And Helen Wynne, the woman who Bill left money to in his will, uh, and was a close friend of Bill's,
Mm-hmm.
she suffered from depression also.
Mm.
And she and Bill worked together on a campaign to introduce niacin as something to help people with depression.
Huh.
And if you go to New York and go to the AA General Service and read Bill's letters, what you see in all of them is his desire to help people who have a problem, both an alcohol problem and a mental health problem. He,
Mm.
he was the first to say alcohol is but a symptom. You know, in one of the letters I read, I almost laughed out loud. He was talking to this guy. He says, you know, we're all a little nuts here. He says, you know, we got some mental twists, as I've said in the book. He says, I imagine sooner or later there'll be a Neurotics Anonymous. And there was for a while, and they changed the name of it to Emotions Anonymous.
Ah.
So, you know, Bill had an open mind and a
Mhm.
wide lens that he looked at the world from.
Oh wow. That is really, really cool. I've heard of Emotions Anonymous and I've been a part of a meeting before, and I didn't really know where that one sprung up from. And at first I was like, Emotions Anonymous, I don't need help with that. And then by the end I was like, oh hey, yeah, never mind. That was good. Um, but real quick, y'all mentioned how y'all were able to do research and everything like that through letters left behind and everything. So I know as a guy, I don't have the best foresight. So Joy, do you think that Lois is the one that had the foresight to hold on to all the letters or anything, or is there anything that actually mentions how everything got preserved for the story to actually unfold later on?
Well, there are more letters saved by Lois than there are the same kind of memorabilia saved by Bill, and I think that might be just a girl thing.
But
Huh.
and Bill was a prolific writer,
Mm-hmm.
and so Nell Wing went to work with him for him as an administrative assistant secretary, and became the first archivist for AA.
Mm.
And she was like an adopted daughter for them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I'm not sure if you know that Lois was unable to have children. They had three miscarriages in a 2 year period, 3 year period, and they tried to adopt. And Lois's best friend, whose husband gave Bill a job on Wall Street, uh, was a reference. And her friend told the adoption agency that Bill and Lois were not fit parents because of Bill's drinking problem.
Oh.
And so they were never able to have children.
Oh.
And the uh, so how do I get into this story?
How did they decide to preserve everything for the story
Exactly.
to actually
No
unfold?
wing, no wing. So no wing was like an adopted daughter to them. That's why I
Oh,
went
okay.
there. So they didn't have any children of their own. No wing was like a daughter, and so no wing saved all the uh, material from the office, from the AA office.
Oh.
Lois saved all the personal things. And so the two sources, the biggest sources for materials are the stepping stones, which is their home out in Katona, New York. And there you can read all the letters and all the journals and all everything that Lois wrote, as well as Bill's letters. And then if you go to AA General Service Office in Manhattan, then you write, there's all the official letters and stuff that Bill wrote in communication.
Oh, wow. Um, hang on. There was a question right there. Oh boy, what was that question? It was right on the tip of my tongue. Oh no.
Well,
Go
in
ahead.
her later years, Lois was mindful of the fact that they had become symbols for the recovery movement. So
Hmm.
she was uh, conscious of saving things and preserving things in the later years, so
Mm.
that upon her death, uh, the home would be transformed into an archive and a museum. And people to this day go there to visit, just to be in the presence of the people responsible for saving their lives.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I want to do whenever I get a chance to travel a little bit more is go visit the places where it kind of all started, because it's like I'm way down here in Texas, and if it weren't for everything that happened up over there, I wouldn't be here, like plain and simple, and so many other people. So it's kind of like a pilgrimage of some sorts, right?
Very
Um,
much so. As you know, this month is the anniversary of AA. It got started June 10th, 90 years ago, in Akron, Ohio. And Tom and I had the great fortune of going to Akron for their Founders Day celebration. And again,
oh,
uh, to be in the presence of the place where it all happened. Uh,
oh man, that is so cool. I need to do that one year, man. Was it like a big parade and stuff? Because I mean, it should be.
Yeah, they have on Saturday night, it's at Akron University and they fill the stadium. So there are 15 or 20,000 recovering people, and they have a countdown of how long you've been sober. The oldest person this time was 61 years.
Whoa.
And then on Sunday morning, the thing I love the most, I went out. They have a motorcycle parade that leads everybody out to the cemetery to visit Dr. Bob's grave.
Whoa.
And they're like 1,000 motorcycles.
Huh.
And, and I stood there and I looked there and I thought about each one of these people and their lives. And what was their life like before they got into AA? And what's their life like now? And you
Yeah.
multiply that all over the world, all kinds of different people, all kinds of races and ethnicities, and it doesn't matter. This marriage changed the life of people all over the world.
Yeah, and that is crazy to think about too, because I mean, whenever you say bikers, the first thing that pops in people's heads is like hardened criminals of some sort. But
Exactly. Right.
but these are
Meth
people,
heads.
yeah, these are people in recovery. They are now walking a more righteous path, and they are holding themselves as best as they can. And they may not be perfect, but they are definitely examples that people can turn a new leaf, right?
mhm.
Oh, um, oh man, and you're right. It's just that ripple effect, that butterfly effect, is astounding because I know a lot of people want to think that they're going to change the world, but did Lewis or Bill actually know the gravity of what they were undertaking and how it was going to change the world? Or was it just more hopeful wishing and just hoping for the best the whole time?
I think in the early days, they did not know. I think Bill had a marketer's, myth maker's frame of mind. So eventually he saw, this could be really big, I think. Um, I don't know if Lois had that kind of sensibility, though. Certainly, over time she realized how important the work she and Bill had done became.
Mm.
But starting out, I don't think she was in that space. Tom may have a different slant on it.
Well, when they traveled to Europe and they were in places where they didn't speak English and they could feel the AA feeling in the meeting without hearing knowing, they knew what the words meant.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and Bill wrote to Dr. Bob. Uh, so this is before 1950. This is pretty early on.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Bob, I'm sorry you can't be here with me. Bob was sick." He says, "But you can feel it. This is going to grow. It's happening all over the world." And so, Bill was getting a sense as he traveled that, I mean, one of the things that astounded me when I got into this, having worked in nonprofit organizations,
Mm-hmm.
was how there were no rules. They just said, yeah, you're a group if you want to be a group. Uh, all you need is a desire to stay sober.
Mm.
Uh, and no, and all these groups took this book, and salespeople and people. There's a guy called Captain Jack who was a international longshoreman,
Mm-hmm.
and they just recently released some of his writings at a general service, and I really loved reading him. It's like reading a mystery book. I mean, he would go into a place with his ship, some small city or country,
Mm-hmm.
and he would visit the doctors, the ministers, and the boat runners, and he'd give them all a big book, and he'd explain it to them, and then he'd go to the bars and start talking to the people in the bars. Before he left town, he'd started a meeting in that town.
Huh.
And he did this all over the world. Uh, and that's how AA spread. It was not somebody in New York saying, let's try to get into this market. It was just spontaneous combustion.
Oh man. And it was the perfect mix of everything in there, but without that love and support from the inside of the marriage, it never would have actually fruition like it did, huh?
That's for sure. Yeah.
Well, one thing in reading this book or writing this book that underscored for me was the notion that nothing significant happens because just one man has a great idea. It takes a lot of it takes a lot of people, and a
Uh-huh.
lot of times the work of those people is invisible to the larger public, but it's still critical. I've come to the belief that Dr. Bob and Bill were not the founders of AA, or not the only founders of AA. I think Ebby should be credited as a founder. Ebby, you might know, is the man who got Bill sober. He came to Bill because he had gotten religion and talked to Bill, and that started the wheels in Bill's mind turning, that eventually led to his spiritual awakening and uh, him having a whole change of life. Ebby's sobriety was on again, off again. He and Bill were like each other's sponsors, but Ebby eventually did die sober. So I don't think he just included it because he didn't maintain sobriety. There was a man in Ohio named Clarence who instituted a lot of the practices that people do in meetings, but he
Mm-hmm.
was kind of braggadocious and rubbed people the wrong way. So I think that's why his name gets left out of the narrative. And of
Mm.
course, Lois and and Dr. Bob's wife Ann did a lot to establish AA, but because they were just the little women, they don't get mentioned a lot either. So you
Mm.
need all of these people plus many more. There was a nurse in Ohio named Sister Ignatia. She was a nun, and and she did a lot of work. You know, a lot of the practical work of tending sick people in the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
and not just the men who would come to the hospital because they were detoxing or had DTs, but she would also talk to their wives to sort of encourage them and minister to them. So if all of these people hadn't done what they've done, we wouldn't be here today.
Oh yeah, for sure. After this conversation, I'm looking at recovery in a whole new way. I'm looking at AA in a whole new way. I'm looking at just everything in a whole new way after this. It's like I need to definitely make sure to give this one right here some credit for the help that she does with the podcast, because otherwise people are just going to be like, oh, it's all about him, and it's like, no, she's a big part of it too. Like, um, so Oh man, this is just really, really interesting stuff. What were the biggest questions that y'all still have about everything that y'all have uncovered? Because surely there's holes still missing in some parts of the story, right?
Well, I, for one, would like to know what Lois really thought about some of the things that happened. In her diary, she doesn't talk, particularly once Bill got sober, she doesn't talk about it in great detail. For example, when they lost the house
Mm.
that she had grown up in,
Mm-hmm.
she just mentions in her diary, you, the bank foreclosed, we had to move out. That's about as detailed as she gets.
Hmm.
There had to be a lot of emotion around that.
Oh yeah.
There had to be a lot of anger about that. That she was a dutiful wife, and then she just, you know,
Huh.
accepted the reality of the fact that they had to go, and that
Mm.
started their vagabond years of not having a house to call their own for a long time. And then as AA grew and became a phenomenon, I think Lois in particular was careful to show the public a positive face, regardless of what she might have really been thinking and feeling at any given time. So that's the question for me. What was she really thinking and feeling as all of this was transpiring?
Yeah, for sure. Cause oh, sorry, Tom.
Well, related to that, one of the things I found really odd was when Ann Smith died, Lois didn't comment on it in her journal. Uh,
Oh,
she was kind of silent on it. And she visited, she went to Akron when Bill was out there at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning and spent a week with the Smiths. The Smiths came to New York and stayed with Bill and Lois, and they were had back and forth in friendships. Uh, it's the nature of the relationship between Anne and Lois is not very clear. It'd be wonderful to find out more. Dr. Bob and Anne were not as prolific as Bill and Lois, nor
Mm-hmm.
did anybody preserve too much. I mean, there is some things preserved in the library and a great archives in Dr. Bob's home. Another thing that I'm curious about, and I, you know, these 12, the decision to keep AA and Narcotics Anonymous separate was an important early decision. That if
Mm.
you have a drug problem, you ought to go talk about it someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and and they wanted to make sure, and the decision that they didn't say, well, we're going to. It's kind of like letting the group start. They trusted anybody with the 12 steps. If you say you want to use the steps, then go ahead and use them.
Mm-hmm.
And the the singleness of purpose over time makes for very complex recovery. And at the end of every meeting in most fellowships, there's
Mm-hmm.
this pledge. When anyone anywhere reaches out for help, let the hand of AA or NA or whatever be there, and
Mm.
let it begin with me. And so, what does that pledge mean in the world we live in today, where we understand better how trauma affects addictions and how uh, a particular addiction is but a symptom?
Mm-hmm.
And so, my question is, if Bill were alive today, or people, if there were more entrepreneurial leaders in AA, wouldn't there be more attempt to cross fertilize the 12-step movement, to keep the singleness of purpose, but to make sure that there's collaboration uh, across these many programs so that more people get recovery? Because to me, the tragic thing, there's a survey done by for Al-Anon internationally. 15,000 people responded to it, and 69 out of every 100 had problems of alcohol in their family
Mm-hmm.
more than 2 generations.
Oh wow.
And you think about that, and you think about the people in the meetings you go to, and how many people talk about the challenge of their childhood. And so in my family, I have a cousin who had a father who was an alcoholic, and She got pregnant, got married when she was 15 or 16, had two kids.
Mm.
Uh, Eventually, was abused by the guy and had to leave him. And then she ended up uh, going off to college and became a therapist and has been in recovery. And she was the first one in our family really to lead the way to recovery. And I was the second. I went to a funeral recently, and there were six other cousins there who are all in recovery. And so either the disease is getting bigger or the recovery is getting bigger. It's not neutral. Uh, it's going in one direction or the other. And so if our job is to reach out our hand when anyone, anywhere, that's the families of these people that are
Mm.
having trouble as well, because the families are getting crushed, uh, and the children and the adult children. And so to me, kind of an unanswered question is what might have been done differently and what might we do today?
Hmm. Okay. So, having learned everything on that end, real quick, Tom, what's your favorite step?
My favorite step is the 11th step and the third step, if I can have
Ooh,
two. You know,
11th and 3rd?
yeah, if you, I, whenever I act crazy, I call it insanity and I say, it looks like I need to put something into the care of a loving higher power. And then I need to pray about it and ask for guidance. And those things really help me.
Oh man, that's awesome. I love that because uh, I think it's kind of important to have a step in mind whenever you think about recovery. It doesn't necessarily have to be like your favorite one, but it like if someone says recovery, if you're familiar with the 12 steps, you should be able to be like, yeah, that one. But at the same time, this whole world movement, like you said, either addiction and the disease is getting bigger or recovery is getting bigger. And I'm kind of like, I wonder if it is both, but it's one of the spiritual battles, right? That we hear so much about. And like, Lois, did she really dig too much? Y'all said that she had her own spiritual awakening. What exactly did she do with that, though, besides Al Anon and just continuing to support Bill?
Well, that's pretty major to me.
Yeah, it
Having
is.
Alan supporting Bill, but she had a Christian foundation, so
Hmm.
she had a higher power. She believed in God. She knew about prayer and the power of prayer, love, and service. So she was coming from a slightly different direction. Um, I would say she needed an overhaul, but it wasn't like she was starting from ground zero.
Hmm.
In my own path, how I came to 12 steps, uh, there was a very popular writer some years ago who was a psychiatrist named M. Scott Peck, and he wrote a bestseller called The Road Less Traveled. I loved the book, so I went to hear him speak when he
Uh-huh.
was in. And at that time, I was very much into church, and he said, AA is more of what God had in mind for the church than what the church is. And I found that a provocative statement. How could a bunch of drunks know more about God than me? So it made me curious. I'm like, okay, I want to go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting to see, what is it they're doing there.
Hmm.
So I didn't go immediately, but eventually I went to a AA meeting in my neighborhood, and at the end of the meeting, I had to say he was right. This is this is more like church than the church is,
Oh,
and
wow.
so that was my introduction to 12 Steps. I'm not in Alcoholics Anonymous, and about I would say maybe a year or two after that, a friend of mine, she and I were talking on the phone, and like so many people, we were talking about losing weight. And she said, I went to this thing called Overeaters Anonymous. I didn't like it, but if you're interested, I picked up some of the literature. I can mail it to you. And
Huh.
I'm thinking, Overeaters Anonymous, is that like Alcoholics Anonymous? So I said, yes, send me the literature. So she did. And when I was reading the brochure she sent me, one of the pieces said, you might be a compulsive overeater if you do one of the following things. And they had a whole list of behaviors. And as I read through the list, I picked out maybe three things that I thought fit me. And then when I got to the end of the list, I said, well, only three things on this list sound like they could be me. I guess I'm not a compulsive overeater. And then the very next line said, if three or more of these things, I did what you did. I laughed. I laughed and I put all that literature in the envelope and stuffed it in the drawer. And then a year after that, I was cleaning up and I came across that list. And so I did the checklist again, and this time 5 things applied to me. And I was like,
Ooh.
oh, yeah. So, and that's when I went to a meeting.
Oh man. So how long, Tom? You've been in recovery for 45 years, correct?
Right? Uh-huh.
I
And
joined Overeaters Anonymous somewhere in the mid to late 1990s.
okay, so right around 30 years, correct? Or am I
Wow.
thinking too far? Well, I mean, I was born in 92, so I'm
Yeah,
33 in August. So
yeah.
it's like I'm not trying to age anyone.
Well, if you're old, you're old. I have to own up to it. Yes.
Well, but that's also part of the thing is that like we have to have experience such as y'all's own. Otherwise, people like me wouldn't have the chance of getting the gift of recovery, you know? And it is such an important gift that everyone should understand it. Everyone should try to I honestly personally think a lot of people would benefit from the 12 steps even if they don't have a substance abuse issue of any sort, you know? But I mean, that's just me having been one of those people that was like, I'm never going to do the 12 steps. And now I'm like, oh yeah, the 12 steps saved my life. They're awesome. We are getting close to the end of this episode, though, unfortunately. But I've got to say, this has been an amazing conversation. And I have to ask, do you think that we could see y'all again in the future so we could either cover the things that we may have not hit or just see how everyone's recovery is going? Because this is a recovery podcast.
We'd love to
Absolutely.
do that. After you read the book, Keegan, we'll come back and we'll have a chat about the book and any questions you want to talk about.
Okay, that sounds great to me.
Encourage your listeners to check out A Marriage That Changed the World, Lois and Bill Wilson, and the Addiction Recovery Movement.
Yep. I was
And
just about. Oh, go ahead.
well, and you know, you can get it easily on Amazon, but if you're not a fan of that particular brand, you can get it at steppingstones.org or at any bookstore.
Okay. So it is titled A Marriage or The Marriage.
A,
A Marriage. So A Marriage That Changed the World, Lois and Bill Wilson, and the Addiction Recovery Movement. I love it. Uh, Thank you for plugging y'all's stuff in for me because I was like, oh, we're right there for the plug. Yay. But do y'all have any shout outs to anyone in particular that y'all would like for them to hear whenever they hear this episode?
well, I'd just like to shout out to all the people going to Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they hope they have a great time there. I'll be in Charlotte at an alternative event in Charlotte, North Carolina next
Oh,
weekend. It's a roundup by a group called Not a Glum Lot. If you're looking for something in that area, check it out. But
okay.
and our book will be on sale at the Sober City in Vancouver. So if you're in Vancouver, check it out.
Alrighty. I love it. And Joy, you got any shout outs to anyone in particular out there?
Uh, Thank you to Stepping Stones, the archive and museum for Lois and Bill Wilson. They were very helpful to us in the development of the book and the promotion of the book. And also Dr. Bob's House and Archives in Akron, Ohio, especially the archivist Dale LaForge. He's a fascinating storyteller and knows so much about how all of this got started. So those
Oh
two,
man.
those two entities, I'm very grateful
Sweet. Well, because y'all are grateful for them, I'm grateful for them, and I know the audience and the world is also grateful for them because we wouldn't have this conversation otherwise. And who knows how many people are going to hear this and going to be like, ah, they went through that. Oh, he was married during that whole time? Okay, well, maybe I should pick it up and figure out what the secrets are, right? Um, let's see.
for. Could
Do
I show?
y'all?
Could I
Huh?
show your audience a picture of the book?
Yeah, of course. That's actually
Okay,
what I was going to try to pull up, actually, was a picture, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to.
there we go. And this is a picture of Bill and Lois in their later years
Ah,
on the grounds of Stepping Stones, their home in Westchester, New York.
that is way too cool. And it's funny because they almost look exactly how I kind of would picture, you know? I don't know why, but they just kind of do. It's fitting, I guess. That picture is very picturesque, I should say.
And
Um,
it,
I think it's a different picture on the cover. Tom picked this one, and in retrospect, I think he chose the right one.
um, let's see. I'm trying to. Oh, Joy, I had asked you before we started recording what your favorite step was, and
Step
I
11,
step 11.
solitude prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, as we understood it.
Yep.
So,
Oh,
so the journey of getting to know God and trying to figure out what He's trying to tell me to do. uh, I find that fascinating. As I mentioned to you, the thing that drove me to AA in the beginning was the idea that being told that these people knew more about God and had a more intimate relationship with God than I did,
hmm
and so that was provocative to me. I wanted to know more. I wanted to improve my conscious contact and have what they had. So,
It is interesting to watch people in recovery have a little bit of a spark of life that other people not in recovery or not having addiction issues seem to not have, right? It's
mm-hmm,
like recovery gives life to people.
mm-hmm.
yep.
Um, but let's see, we've got a few more minutes. I've got one other step question that is more personally related, and that is, y'all have a favorite step. So which one is your most hated step? And have you reworked the steps?
Making amends to other people, admitting I'm wrong, properly admitting I'm wrong. I'm not big on that.
I don't blame you. Tom, you got one that you're not too particularly fond of?
Well, the one that I sometimes forget about that's really important is the sixth and seventh steps.
Mm-hmm.
That, I get into my self help fix myself mode, and the sixth and seventh step invite me to be willing to let God take care of these things.
Yep.
And that's the beautiful thing about the third step, that uh, this loving God has said, "Be in my care, I got you." And so I don't have to make myself perfect. And I
Mm.
grew up with that illusion that my job was to make me perfect and you perfect. And so I was going to tell you what was wrong with you and try to help you fix it. And then I was going to beat myself up and try to work on me. Man, that's a painful way to live. I'm glad I don't live like that anymore.
Yep, I know the feel because I've got perfection issues myself, and I don't know any person that deals with addiction that doesn't. It's kind of weird, right? Um,
Hmm.
but last question, I swear. Well, actually, no, last one. If there is someone out there that is looking to get into recovery, but they're a little hesitant on it, or they're trying their 12 steps and they're having trouble with it, what is one piece of advice that you would like to offer that helped you get through your 12 steps the first time?
Mm.
Well, I, you know, it's really hard to not uh, qualify myself out. We all have terminal uniqueness. We're going to die from our uniqueness.
Yeah.
And that's, if you can kind of bring yourself to look at that, yeah, I'm not that bad yet. Uh, this isn't me yet. And just sit and try to find one person that you can trust a little and talk to them. And just sit until you can find that one person. And then when you find that person, find another. Because it's our isolation that kills us. Uh, we need relationships, we need connections. And 12 step rooms offer that to us and a way out.
Beautifully well said. I love that. Thank you, Tom. And Joy, what piece of advice would you offer to someone looking to work their 12 steps or having trouble with it?
Hmm. That the gifts that you will eventually get will make you glad you hung around. So,
I think that one's good.
it may take longer than you like to reap the benefits, but if you stick around, you'll be glad you did.
Oh, so don't leave 5 minutes before the miracle happens, huh?
Well, actually, I hate that. I hate that slogan, which is interesting because my sponsor has said that to me on a number of times, and so okay, well, I'll wait 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes later, nothing has changed, and I'm pissed. So, so
Uh,
yeah.
that may just be a level of expectation that you have to work through on step 4 and 5. So,
Evidently.
well,
I have to
with
share this little funny story. When I went to Stepping Stones with Tom,
uh-huh.
they give you a tour of the place, and you are taken to the area where he did all his writing. And it's this
Hmm.
big, massive wooden desk set off from the house in a small room in a building detached from the house. This huge, big desk, very
Hmm.
prominent and important. And within their home, you get to see the kitchen table that Abby first witness to um, Bill about, there is a way out. There's another way to live your life. You don't have to be a drug for the remainder of your days. So the kitchen is small, and so the kitchen table is small. And I took pictures of myself and Tom sitting at the kitchen table. And I took a picture of myself behind Bill's big writing desk. And then I showed the pictures to my sponsor. And she looked at him and she said, Joy, I think you need to pay attention to the fact that Bill's writing desk is bigger than his kitchen table. So that's a lesson for you about how you eat. You should spend more time writing and creating art than overeating. So,
Oh man, I'm sorry, but your sponsor stabbed me on that one too. Damn. Okay. Okay. I see. Ooh, your sponsor's got some spice.
she does indeed.
Well, I think everyone needs a little bit of spice and a little bit of sugar whenever it comes to recovery. Unless you've got the sugar addiction, don't do sugar. Never mind. I didn't say anything. But we need a little bit of light in the world, and y'all are definitely bringing a whole lot of it, especially with the book. And I'm excited to see where this goes. And I'm just so honored and pleased that I got to speak with y'all because I learned a whole lot. I know my audience learned a whole lot, and it's just been amazing. And I'm looking forward to the future. I'm looking forward to reading the book and asking more questions because I'm going to write them down, and I'll have just everything ready to be like, all right. And I bet y'all didn't think about this one. So,
Well,
We'd be
if you
delighted.
invite us, we'll keep coming back.
all right. I love it. Unfortunately, with that, we have hit the end of this episode. So I would like to say to everyone out there, thank you for listening to Retrieving Sanity on WDJY 99.1 FM. And as always, love yourself if you can and do your best at it. Love those around you if you can, but love yourself first. And just try to smile a little bit. Even if you're not having the best day, just a little helps. But we'll see you next week. And hopefully, you're just a little bit more sober next time. And if you're not, well, we'll see you anyways. Because we love you. So, much love. Shalom. And
Thank you, Keegan. It's been an honor.
thank you. And we can stop. Ooh.